Hello. To demonstrate how the file data importer works, I just chosen this model from Odoo, fleet vehicle, which represents cars. So we have here a list of cars. We have the information about the cars, and if we want to create a new one, you'll see that the only two mandatory fields are the model, which is a many to one object, and the license plate, which is a chart. So let's go now to in this case, XLSS file that contains the data to be imported. And this is our file. This is the file to be imported. In this file, uh, for this basic sample, we're just interested in importing, in this column, which is the license plate, which is one of the two mandatory fields during the creation. Um, the rest of the columns are not important for this example, but the most representative ones are the driver, which is composed by the first name and the last name in these two columns, and a contact from this driver, which is represented by these two columns. So in Odoo, basically, a fleet vehicle will have one driver represented by a many to one object to a REST partner, which will be this, and then this REST partner will have one contact, which is one of the objects inside the one-to-many object that REST partner has, which will be these two columns. So let's proceed to configure our import object to import these two rows. So we go to File Data Importer and we create a new one. So we specify the file that we want to import. In this case, is vehicles.xlsx. Description, we can just put cars. Import type, in this case, it's an XLS file. And well, as a row limit, since we are just importing two rows, we don't need any kind of limit. This is meant to be used in case we have a very huge file and we need to split the import in some batches of rows. For example, if we have a file with, let's say, 1 million of rows, maybe we want to specify a limit of 500 rows, and they will be processed in batches of 500, and then the following 500 rows, following 500 rows, and so on. So like this, we won't have any memory issues. Okay, to first demonstrate the basic features of the fail data importer, I just chose this module, fleet vehicle, from Odoo, from the core. So this basically represents a set of cars. You see the list of cars. When you just install this module with the simple data, we can see this. If you want to create a new one, you'll see that the only two mandatory fields are the model and the license plate. The model is a many to one object to a model called fleet vehicle model, and the license plate is of type char. So let's import vehicles. This is the file we want to be imported. As you can see, the headers start at row number 5, and each file represents a vehicle and a set of objects linked to the vehicle. For example, these two columns represent the driver that will drive this vehicle, which is this field. It's a rest partner. It's a many to one to rest partner. And these two are also a rest partner object that represents a contact inside the driver. So for this first example, let's just import the basic information about the vehicle, which is just the license plate. Okay, so let's create our first file data object. Let's create it. So as description, let's just say, for example, cars. The import type will be a XLS, which is the extension of the file. And about these two fields, the row limit, if you specify one value here different from -1, that means that the whole file will be processed by batches. So for example, if we put 500, that means that the rows will be treated each 500, meaning 500, then the following 500, then the following 500 will be imported, and so on. With this option, we avoid having memory issues. And regarding the column total, well, for row limit, let's say in this case just -1 because we're just importing 2, so we won't have any issue. For this field, column total, if we specify a number different from -1, for example, in this case, the number of columns in total, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14. A check will be performed before importing, checking that the total number of columns is 14. Otherwise, an error will be raised and the import won't start. But in this case, we trust the file. I know that it's well provided, so I just leave it as it was. And here I select the file, which is vehicles. And the starting row, it's a good point because in our case it doesn't start at row 0 but at row 5, but not really 5 because for the file data imported the index starts at 0. So in this case it won't be 5 but 4 because it starts by 0. So that will be the first 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So let's say 4. So now that we have specified all the information regarding the file, let's create our import object. As I said, the model I chose is fleet vehicle. Which is this one, fleet vehicle. And now we have to select a primary key. The primary key that the file data importer expects is a column or a set of columns that together make the object, in this case the vehicle, unique in the system. So for example, in this case, license plate is enough because I know for sure that by specifying the license plate I will get just a single car. There are not more than one car with the same license plate. There is no ambiguity. So in my case, this column is enough as a primary key. So let's say license plate as our primary key, and that means that we have to define in here the columns license plate because the importer expects this column. So this parameter can be ignored by now. I'll explain later the meaning of this. The column number is very important and also starts by 0. So in this case, each letter A we start by 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it starts at 4. And the field is license plate. So we're saying basically here column number 4 from this file matches the license plate from our fleet vehicle object, and the type of this is char, and this is optional. We'll see in a future what's the purpose of this. So now it's okay. And if you remember, the other mandatory field which was needed for the creation was the model, but we have an issue, that is that we don't have any column here that represents a model, so the import in theory couldn't be done automatically because it won't be possible to be created since there is no information about the model coming from the file. So for this case, what I'm going to do is to click on this option, which means that for this column I'm going to define the value is going to be filled automatically. So actually, as you saw, the column and the type are removed because they are not relevant for this kind of cases. We just want to specify the field that we want to be filled automatically. In this case, is the model. And now we're using this option in here, which is providing the default value. And if you see the schema, in case of many to one, which is our case because the model is a many to one object, we'll have to specify the ID of the record. So for example, let's say that for the records we want to create, we want to assign by default this Opel Astra model. So let's click on it. We are in fleet vehicle model and we see that it has ID number 2. So let's just use this ID. With this option, if we click on it, only on create, means that the default values will be only applied in case that the records are creating, so in case they're new records. By clicking on this, we're making sure that if some of these records were already existing in the database, the default values are not going to overwrite the values that were already set in the existing records. So just being applied for the new ones, which is what we want. And that's it. We're done with this column. So now we would be able to import these two records. But just to show you a bit more about this optional feature, let's create a third column in which I want to set by default, I don't know, for example, this attribute car value. Let's say that, for example, our starting value for the cars is 10,000. So let's say, okay, so for field, well, let's go by step by step. No. This is to be set automatically too, because we're going to provide a default value. This doesn't come from the file. The field to be set is car value, and the default value in this case, which is float, we see that we can just provide the float directly, so 10,000. We click on this again because we don't want to overwrite with 1000 uh, the value of the card that is already existing in case it's existing. So only on creation. And that's it. Let's try to import the objects like this. This should be enough. So let's import it, and they've been imported. So if we check now to the vehicles, we see there are two new vehicles corresponding to these rows. And if we go inside, we see that the model used is actually the one with ID number 2, as we specified, and the car value is 10,000, also as specified in the default values. So they were created successfully. Now imagine that they are created already, but we want to update them. Imagine now that, for example, we want to, let's say, say that the car value is not 10,000 but 25,000. We want to update them, so we must disable this option because they already created. So let's try to import it again. So you see, 2 records have been updated, and as you can see, the car value has been updated. Let's move on now to some more advanced features.